Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Did You Know Genesee County History. We're back here from the Holland Land Office Museum. I'm Ryan Duffy, along with Rachel Bellis.
Hello.
I hope you enjoyed our first one, our pilot episode, but we're back with more interesting history of Genesee County and maybe things you did or did not know. So in honor of the 250th of the United States, we thought we'd talk about also it being President's Day in February, talking about a founding father of the United States that has a local connection, and you've probably seen his name around Batavian, Genesee County at different points. So today we're going to talk about the really extraordinary life of Robert Morris, and often overlooked his contributions to the forming of the United States, but also his contributions to our local area.
That's right. I don't think I know much about this founding father. You know, I've heard of all the classics, George Washington, Ben Frank, Alexander Hamilton, but Robert Morris was one that really, I missed the information about him, I guess. So it'll be interesting to learn, and I've brought some questions. So we're all going to learn about this founding father together.
Yes, so we will jump right in. But Robert Morris is someone of sort of a conflicted nature, and I think he might even be happy that you don't know so much about him in a way, because it seemed to be his style to sort of be in the background and work behind the scenes and not necessarily seek out the credit. But Morris is unique just from the very beginning in that he's one of the founding fathers actually born in England. Many of them were born in the colonies, but he was born in Liverpool, England on January 20th, 1734. His parents were Robert Morris Sr. And Elizabeth Murfitt. And it's assumed that the younger Robert was actually born out of wedlock, which seems to be sort of a familial trend. And until he was 13, he actually was raised by his grandmother. And after that, he was sent to Maryland, where his father had a strong tobacco trade. So basically, his entire childhood was spent independent of his parents.
Okay, and were the parents probably sending money home to
he was
him?
being supported by them, but it seems like he never really lived with them.
Wow.
So he lives in Maryland with a business partner of his father's, and then a couple of years later, they send him to Philadelphia so he can start to learn the trades. And he's sent to live with a friend of his father's, Charles Greenway. And Greenway ran a shipping and banking business and took Robert Morris, not junior, but the younger, on as an apprentice in that, and put him into a firm that they had some connections with under Charles Willing.
Now, was this a common sort of route of education for sort of, I don't know what he would have been considered, sort of middle class, merchant class boys?
Yeah, usually you were brought up in the profession that the family trade was in. So his father was in the trade of different goods. Liverpool was a huge port in England, probably the busiest, really. So he basically was brought up in the same business, just not the family business, actually. So they got him involved in with another group to have him learn the trade so he could hopefully take on the family business. That's kind of was often the goal of this, learn from somebody else, and then when they're ready, take over. So.
And him being born out of wedlock didn't really sort of put a dent in his succession of,
No,
the family
because
business?
he was born to his parents. They just weren't married yet.
I see.
So
okay.
He was not a illegitimate child. He just was not born in a conventional timeline, we'll say.
Understood. Okay.
So in 1750, his father dies and leaving much of his estate to Robert. And on top of that, he basically rises through the ranks of Willing's firm and starts to become a major partner in it, even as young as a teenager. So he's 16 when his father dies, and soon after that, he is a key agent for Willing. He befriends Thomas Willing, who was Charles's son, and they become good friends. And when the older Willing dies a few years later, it's now the two younger taking over the firm. So the next generation has taken over. He was then made a full partner in the firm, and it became known as Willing, Morris and Company. So his name is now on the building.
Wow. Okay.
At 23. So pretty quick rise. And this firm grows over time, and we'll kind of get into some of his larger dealings. But in 1784, the firm is actually the first to send an American ship to China.
Oh, I think I've heard about this ship. This was sort of as to Britain, sort of like we can do our own trade. Like that was sort of a signal that they were trying to send.
Morris was very much in the concept of free trade, and this was sort of a way to establish American trade in the Far East. So yes, the Empress of China they sent to China. In his personal life, Morris married when he was 35 years old to a 20-year-old Mary White, who was the daughter of a wealthy lawyer and landholder in the Philadelphia area. So continued to grow his estate. They had 7 children together, the firstborn the same year they were married. They moved to Front Street in Philadelphia, which was sort of a posh area. But they also had a second home out in the country known as the Hills on the Schuylkill River, northwest of the city.
Now, do either of these still stand, either of these homes?
I want to say the Hills is still somewhat in existence. Okay. I don't know about the Front Street property. That was more of a subdued. It just kind of was a home there. Mm-hmm. But they later purchased a rural manor, which they named Morrisville, which was outside of Philadelphia, across from Trenton on the Philadelphia side of the Delaware River. And that sort of became their palatial estate, where they would go in the summer and stuff to get away from the city heat and things. So Robert, like his father, also had a child out of wedlock, Polly. This one, I would say, was more illegitimate. We don't know who the mother is. But Morris did support her financially and stayed in contact with her throughout her entire life.
Now, I see that Polly was born in 63, but he married Mary in 69. So this was a daughter, like an earlier dalliance before he was married.
Yes.
Okay.
But we don't know to whom. So,
gotcha. Or
at least it's not stated. And he also supported a younger half-brother, Thomas, whose father had outside of wedlock as well. So seemed to be a theme there, though this was rather common of these days. But Thomas eventually became a partner in Morris's firm. So he kept him in the family firm and
I guess
became a major partner. So
my question is, I don't want to, spoil anything, but, Morris's businesses go a certain way in the future. Does Thomas sort of get into the same issues that Robert Morris does?
It doesn't seem to be, at least to the same extent.
Okay.
What gets Morris into some trouble are his personal businesses, not involved with his firm.
Understood.
So I don't know how much the family is involved in that.
Okay.
They are involved in the sense that they have to help, but in terms of actually owing, I don't believe so.
Okay. Gotcha.
So in 1781, Morris purchased another home in Philadelphia on Market Street, which was 2 blocks north of Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence and the first Constitution are signed. And he gained clear title to the estate in 1785 and made it his primary residence. So he moves out of Front Street, eventually gives up the Hills, and has Morrisville and has Market Street.
Got it. Okay, so he's got multiple properties at this point, so he's doing very well for himself.
He's got plenty of money to buy a property. And in 1790, after George Washington is elected president, Morris actually offers his house on Market Street as the presidential residence.
Really? So this is Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. Is that house still standing? I don't know if you know.
No.
Okay.
But it's actually the first presidential residence in United States history.
Oh, wow.
And George Washington is the only one to live there because by the time John Adams takes over, we have the White House in Washington, D.C. But this is all happening before Washington, D.C. is actually developed.
Right.
It's in the planning stages. It's being designed, but nobody's there yet. So,
right. Which we will find out later, Morris sort of has a hand in as well, sort of
yes,
things to do with D.C.
Yes. So Morris's home is actually the first presidential residence. And we'll get into later what's actually there now. So as going back to sort of the colonial time, Morris is wrapped up in a lot of the taxation policies that the British lay down because he's big into trade, so a lot of that's affecting his business. In 1765, Great Britain passes the infamous Stamp Act, which causes a lot of issues among the colonists and starts to really foment a lot of the resentment that leads to the eventual breaking.
Because the Stamp Act was putting a tax on sort of a lot of different paper goods, which obviously Morris would have been,
which were
banknotes.
widely used.
Yeah.
So, and especially in trade, you use a lot of paper.
Right.
Just across the board. So
right.
It cost a lot of people a lot more money than what they were thinking they should pay before. So he was a very early opponent of that act. And he would join other merchants in protesting the taxation policies. But he was quoted as saying, "I am a native of England, but from principle am American in this dispute." So he still saw himself as English, but he said, "I side with my American brothers on this particular point."
Yeah.
Eventually, as the unrest grows, and they bring the First Continental Congress in 1774. Morris is not elected there, but he frequently meets with a lot of the delegates meeting in Philadelphia and befriends a lot of the leaders that come out of this, including George Washington and John Jay. And he generally sympathized with a certain position within that group, and it was those who favored to reform the policies but weren't willing to break with Britain.
So tell me a little bit then, at this First Continental Congress, was George Washington and John Jay still sort of in that camp as well?
It was probably more... They were more in that camp still at this point.
Right, okay.
There was a lot less calling for a straight break with Great Britain. Many still felt that it could be reconciled, that things could change, and then, they would still be loyal subjects of the crown. But things escalate quickly.
Got it.
So this is sort of before the major shift, but it is coming. And states are starting to see that, Pennsylvania being one, so they design a committee of safety to supervise defenses of Pennsylvania. Morris is elected to that 25-member group. He's a part of the core group and often serves as chairman when Benjamin Franklin is not around, which happened quite a bit. And Morris is basically put in charge of getting gunpowder. Being a master of trade, it kind of makes sense. He can get his hands on a lot of things. So he basically shifts a lot of his legal trade to more illegal or clandestine activities and starts a large-scale smuggling operation to avoid British laws that were preventing arms and armament from getting to the colonies. Okay,
so here I have a question. Morris's position at this point is he favors reconciliation with Britain.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, he is smuggling arms and ammunition into the country or into Philadelphia. How does he do you know if he tried to reconcile those beliefs? Did he ever try to de-escalate tensions in any way or not really? It was
he was not in a position to de-escalate, really. I think very early on, he realized that he was going to be in the minority of his beliefs, that more and more people were shifting towards home rule. And I think he just he was willing to avoid war, but he didn't want to see his own. He identified with the colonies. He was a colonist. He was not a British, home citizen, really. So he was going to defend his home. He just felt that they didn't necessarily need to break with Great Britain, but he was going to help protect it.
Understood. Okay.
So, yes, he's very conflicted in this, but he sees that if something's going to happen, we should be prepared.
Right.
And he doesn't want to see his friends and family, treated badly, so he's going to help protect it.
Yes.
But he was not saying we should break. But if it's going to happen, we have to be prepared.
Right.
So later on, Morris also becomes the chief smuggler of gunpowder for the Continental Army and purveyor. And eventually he's actually elected as a delegate to Congress. And he's appointed to many committees, one being the Secret Committee of Trade, which was kind of doing more on a wider scale for all the colonies that he was doing for Pennsylvania. So word got out that he was good at smuggling, and he became the smuggler for the Continental Congress, essentially. So he also is on the Committee of Correspondence, which is what it sounds like, writing two different entities, and the Marine Committee. He was appointed eventually later on to the Superintendent of Finance, which basically put him in charge of all the financial matters of the wannabe nation and soon-to-be new nation. And he served in that position for 3 years. He also served as the agent of Marine, which meant he was in charge of the Navy. So he was really our first Secretary of the Navy, even before that position existed.
Okay. And they didn't want to pick a guy who had been in the Navy before?
There really wasn't anybody. That was the problem. They eventually got some, people who served in the British Navy to come on. Now, Morris was not in a direct command position with this. He was sort of doing overall strategy.
Got it.
And this made some sense because he had a large trading network all over the world. So he had connections around the world. He also had a large fleet of ships that he could use to, help with activities if need be. So he favored a naval strategy of attacking Britain's, quote, defenseless places. So sort of the backwaters, not take on the greatest navy in the world directly, but hit them where they're not.
Okay.
And often this included in the Caribbean or sort of some other close places, but not getting in the major shipping lanes where Britain was going to rule the waves easily. And he also helped draft what was called the Model Treaty, which was going to designed to serve as a template for relations with foreign countries. And he was writing that with Benjamin Franklin, John Dickinson, and John Adams.
Do you think these guys ever were like, wow, we're really out of our depth here. We are making this up as we go.
There are times where they admit as much and saying we're kind of just throwing stuff at the wall. I mean, because there really wasn't a straight template for them. They took things from past writers or concepts, but there wasn't saying, oh, somebody else did this, so we're going to do this. But it was more just seeing what stuck, and it evolved over time, and Morris is a classic example of that. So the Model Treaty was really an early proponent of this concept of free trade. So a country can trade with whoever they want. You're not, because under the British system, they weren't allowed to trade with certain countries because they were at war or whatever happened. So this would allow them to trade, the concept of trading all over the world with whoever they wanted. And eventually Morris took over the Secret Committee of Trade, and he had a network of agents all over that were making connections and trying to get deals for the new United States.
Right.
So once the Declaration of Independence is signed, or they're forming that, Morris is there, but he's still not interested in full independence. He still is on the side of reconciliation.
Okay.
And it seems that the Pennsylvania delegation is split, which could prevent the Declaration of Independence being signed.
Okay.
So Morris makes a sacrifice in the sense that he convinces, or is part of the convincing, to have the Pennsylvania delegate excuse themselves from the deliberation, which allows the Declaration of Independence to pass.
Wow. Interesting. So he sort of thought this was a step too far, but he still, despite that, said, you know what, this is the will of the people or the will of this Congress, and we should go for it.
Yes. So basically, without those opponents, it passes on July 2nd and formally declared on July 4th. And Morris is like, well, there goes my political career because I, was against this. But they bring him back, and he's voted to be kept in Congress.
Wow. So why do you think they did that?
just out of straight respect, I think, because he's been doing some things to help them. He just didn't see he did not want to vote for independence because he did not feel that it wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
And maybe that was a fool's hope, but it was also sort of in his best interest because he would still be breaking with Great Britain would break his trade network. So there was some self-interest in that, but he sees the writing on the wall.
So he's a very shrewd man.
Yes. But he is a signer of the Declaration of Independence in August when they have the full signing. And he stated, "I am not one of those politicians that run testy when my own plans are not adopted. I think it is the duty of a good citizen to follow when he cannot lead." So he sees that the will of the people is going in an opposite direction. He is going to support it, even if it wasn't what he necessarily wanted.
Wow, yeah. I think sometimes when we think of the Founding Fathers, it's these sort of concepts that we really admire in them that, who was it that said sort of, I don't agree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. I thought that was a Founding Father, but sort of this concept of it's the good of everyone over our individual
There was a lot of
beliefs.
compromising going on,
Yeah.
and a lot of changing of beliefs or even betraying of initial beliefs to do this. Because he also went on to state, "While I do not wish to see my countrymen die on the field of battle," so he didn't want a war, "nor do I wish to see them live in tyranny." So, because if we have to fight against tyranny, we're going to. I wish we wouldn't, but it seems like we have to, so I'm going to support that. So he continues on trying to secure arms and ammunition and other goods for the fledgling government and the tempted military. So he would use ships from New England to export tobacco and other goods, and then bring in stuff from the Caribbean, basically, and then do this exchange to create some capital. And they also, he was one that was helped appoint envoys to France to help start the negotiations of a formal treaty to bring them in on our side, which ends up being a key factor in the success. But eventually the war comes to their doorstep. Washington's pushed back and Philadelphia falls. And the vast majority of the Continental Congress leaves Philadelphia.
Okay.
Goes either back home or finds other places to basically hang out, and so they can't get arrested by the British and basically hanged for being traitors.
Right.
Morris is not one of those, though. He stays in Philadelphia and helps coordinate the efforts, keeps continuing things, and being a close correspondence for Washington between him and the Congress.
Wow. So did he volunteer to do that, do you know? Or
it seems to be.
Yeah.
Well, he was living in Philadelphia, so
right. So he's like, this is my home. I'm not going to go anywhere.
And since I think he was enough under the radar, he may have not been a strict person of interest for the British. So he may have been able to operate a little bit better than maybe some other individuals.
Got it.
So once the pressure is relieved off of Philadelphia, Morris's role changes. He does have to leave Congress for a while, so he actually misses the drafting of the first edition of the Articles of Confederation, which was really the first plan for the national government. But he does sign it when he comes back. So he's not part of the designing of it, and that becomes a problem. But he does sign it and returns back to Congress, and he is working to help pay military officers because they were not getting paid.
Wow. So once again, Morris comes in with a thing he doesn't really agree with, but he goes, you know what? This is what people want. I will put my name to it.
Yes.
So good for him.
And basically, he starts funding the Continental Army with his own money.
Wow. Like his sort of private money.
Yes.
He's taking out of his own pocket to pay.
Yes. And a lot of that goes for a lot of the military efforts are in some ways solely supported by Morris, if not partially. While this is all going on, Morris is a founder of the Republican Society, which was a political club trying to work out a new state constitution in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
With all the modern things that we think of in a legislature and government, this time at a state level, basing a lot of it off of what they're thinking of for the new United States.
Okay.
So this is getting all the states to start looking at how their governments run. And their sort of opposing force are the constitutionalists, who want sort of the same thing but want it different ways.
Okay.
So they all want the same thing but have different ideas on how that's going to come about. So the constitutionalists start implementing strict price controls in Philadelphia and start arresting merchants that are violating it. But Morris is able to avoid that and actually emerge as the main opponent to this committee.
Okay.
And this price control committee basically doesn't work because people just don't want to follow it. So, and this leads to mob rioting across Philadelphia.
Okay.
But it's not just the constitutionalists that get targeted. It is all of the rich merchants because it is believed that they are all behind it.
Okay, got it.
And they're not. And Morris was against it the whole time, but it is believed he's part of it. So a lot of homes get burned or destroyed. Morris actually is forced to hold up in a friend's house, and it gets besieged by an angry mob.
Yeah, we don't really learn this in school about how sort of...
And this is happening in 1779, so
yeah.
The war is still going on.
Right. But in these early years of how volatile it was in a lot of these cities with all this going on, like you think of like the Sons of Liberty in Boston, and they were, definitely using mobs to sort of change minds and hearts in the city of Boston. So, yeah. So Morris, it seems like his fortunes can kind of change pretty quickly. It seems like he is
wrapped up in the, this torrent that is the early American Revolution. Nothing is stable. Things change on a daily basis. And that even goes for just straight financial. Like, you could be rich one day and poor another day. Like, it's that volatile.
Yeah.
Nobody knows, there's times where the Continental forces are doing well and it seems good. And then there's other times where they're losing every battle. And it's like, okay, are we going to just lose this altogether? So, and Philadelphia was sort of the center of all of this. Right. And it's where you see all of these emotions and groups kind of come together, and sometimes it boils over. Okay.
So it's 1779. Morris, although he's sort of in charge of the Navy, in charge of finances, is also having to dodge angry mobs at points.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Eventually that kind of settles down. The real perpetrators are basically flee the city or are kind of just put out of business, and the mobs get back to their usual daily activities. And while this is going on, he starts expanding his business opportunities, his shipping business, and he starts partnering with other businessmen, often from Maryland and Virginia. And with this group, they form what's called the First National Conglomerate. So conglomerate is usually many businesses all wrapped up into one. This is actually the first one in the United States.
Okay.
And it was often Morris providing the financing and oversight, but left sort of the details to his partners. And on top of that, he gets a group of merchants together to create the Bank of Pennsylvania, which provided some of the purchasing of supplies for the Continental Army, but also Pennsylvania as a whole. So this is really the first state bank in the United States, and Morris is the backer of that. It didn't do everything that we think of as a modern bank doing, but it accepted deposits and was really the leading model for monetary reforms at the national level. And that brought Morris more into the spotlight, and by October 1780, he is elected to the state legislature. So going from the Bank of Pennsylvania, he establishes the Bank of North America, which is the first congressionally chartered national bank. So this is the precursor. This is precursor to the Bank of the United States, which comes about later, but the Bank of North America. And he believed that the national government would be unable to achieve financial stability without being able to levy taxes or tariffs, which is something that the Articles of Confederation did not allow. Mm-hmm. So he is thinking very much as what the Federalist would be in a strong federal government. But he was unable to convince anybody else that they needed to change the Articles of Confederation at this time. So, so it wasn't a national bank. It was a private bank that operated for everybody, though.
Okay, got it.
which was governed by its investors, but was subject to inspection by the superintendent of finance, who, guess what, is Robert Morris. So it would take the national government's deposits, provide loans to Congress, and issue banknotes. So it did everything that the national bank would do. It just wasn't the national bank. Right.
But he saw the need for this. He's the one paying for the Continental Army. He's the one that says, the government needs to loan this money to me, like not just directly, right, but like through an institution.
It was the need to help finance.
Yeah.
Because they had really no way of financing other than through private entities.
Right. Okay.
So he believed that this bank would help finance the war, stabilize the currency, and bring the country together under a single monetary policy. Because you also have to remember at this time, every single state had their own currency.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that made it even more difficult.
Okay.
So it took some time to get going. So Morris actually provided over the issue of a new currency referred to as Morris notes.
So this is him trying to sort of standardize the currency of the United States.
Yeah, so he actually is the first standardized currency of the United States. And it's backed with his own money.
Wow. Again, so he really must believe in this. Or he's like, I'm in too deep now.
It's definitely a belief.
Yeah.
And he sees that I'm probably the only person right now who can keep this moving forward.
Wow. Okay.
So he eventually convinces Congress to allow him to purchase all the supplies for the Continental Army and require states to furnish funding rather than supplying the goods themselves. So one entity is going to buy everything, and the states will basically just pay into it.
Okay, so he's streamlining the process of like, how are we going to get supplies to the Continental Army? That is still fighting, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not over yet. And in January 1782, the charter from Congress happens and the Bank of North America starts.
Okay.
So it took him several years to even get it to the point where it could start. And they eventually get currency into circulation. He tries to establish the first national mint for a single coinage and the first decimal currency. So not just $1, but our coins, essentially.
Right.
But Congress isn't willing to go that far yet. So he appoints several receivers to help circulate banknotes, and one of those is Alexander Hamilton.
Okay.
And they also report on prices and other, economic functions that are going on throughout the United States, because he's trying to basically create a report that he can share and say, this is why we need what we need.
Okay.
So he's collecting evidence to support what he wants to support.
So why do you think that Morris isn't given as much credit as Hamilton, for example, for creating the sort of economic system of the United States? Because at this point, Hamilton's working for Morris. And
Hamilton actually takes a lot of Morris's ideas.
Okay.
Or Morris imparts upon him the same ideas. It's because Hamilton is in the spotlight. Morris, once the United States is formed, Morris is not really involved. So he is, he's not there at the beginnings of the new country in the same way. And Hamilton is the star.
Right.
And Hamilton is the one in the cabinet. So Hamilton's going to get the attention because he was in the middle of it. Morris at this point has kind of backed away and basically said, I did what I needed to do. I'm going to go back to making my own money.
Right.
And so it's just timing, really. But we'll see that Morris probably could have been in the spotlight if he wanted to. So the issue of paying soldiers continues to come up. Morris is always trying to find a way to solve this issue, and Congress isn't always helpful. Bank of North America is willing to provide loans, but that doesn't really go anywhere. France stops loaning money as well, so there's just less resources. And this eventually leads to what's called the Newburgh Conspiracy, where several Army officers basically start trying to blackmail people to get money.
Okay.
And Morris is kind of thrown under the bus and seen as the person behind this, but it's proven eventually that he had nothing to do with it. He was actually trying to stop it.
Okay.
But because his name was kind of on the forefront of paying the soldiers, it's implied that he was basically getting personal gain from it. And wasn't really, I mean, he was, but that's not why he was doing it.
Got it.
So basically, this kind of pushes him over the edge, and he says that he would not be the minister of injustice. So he resigns as the minister of finance, though Hamilton and others convince him to stay.
So again, we see people who are like, he's like, I'm out of here. I don't believe what you guys
and
believe.
And they go, no, you are the
like,
best guy for this job. We need you to do this.
Yeah.
So he stays on for another year, but the debt is over $42 million at this point for the country, and he's trying to figure out a way to lessen that. So eventually he does leave as superintendent of finance in 1784, but they don't make a successor. They just form a board of treasury, which isn't very effective. So now we are in the post-revolution period.
Okay.
We're successful. We're a new country, or at least trying to make ourselves into a new country. So Morris is one of the 5 delegates selected to attend the Annapolis Convention, which was meant to reform the Articles of Confederation. So this is still before the Constitution.
So people have realized the Articles of Confederation have got some issues. We need to fix some things.
So the Articles of Confederation are really formed before the Revolutionary War is over.
Right.
So they're formed in a different mindset than once independence is gained. They realize, we have to look at this differently.
Right.
So Morris doesn't actually attend the convention, but he is then brought in when they move it to Philadelphia in May of 1787. And it's actually at the Annapolis Convention that George Washington formally resigns his commission as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army.
Right.
But Morris actually opens the proceedings in Philadelphia on May 25th, 1787, and he nominates Washington as chairman of the convention, so as the president of what becomes the Constitutional Convention.
Okay.
And that's backed unanimously. So it's Morris that actually puts Washington on that podium.
Okay, interesting. So he's always kind of the man behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Isn't he?
He knew everybody, and everybody respected him a whole lot, but he was not the one who would necessarily step into the spotlight.
Interesting.
And he is always the one at the meetings, but he very rarely speaks.
Okay.
This is sort of a theme for him in that he's going to speak only when absolutely necessary. He's going to let other people do the jabbering. He's just going to make sure that it works, basically.
Interesting.
So his primary goals were ensuring the federal government had the power to lay tariffs and taxes, something he's been talking about forever, which actually at this point is backed by the majority.
Okay.
So there's this shift now that we want a strong federal government.
Right.
We realize the states can't do it as they used to.
Right.
And then he signs the final document, the Constitution, on September 17th, 1787. And then they basically have to make a whole new document because they've realized the Articles of Confederation it can't be amended the way they need it to.
Okay, so they're like, all right, scrap that, start over.
So he signs the Constitution. So he's one of 6 guys to sign the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Wow. That's amazing.
And the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
So he signs, he's just there at everything.
Once again, Robert Morris says, you know what? I'll put my name to it. You know, we've gone through the process, and here we are, and I'm going to sign it. So
now with the Constitution, we have the creation of our sort of modern government that we would recognize today. So Morris is elected as a senator to Pennsylvania, one of the first 2. And he's also tabbed by President George Washington to be the first Secretary of the Treasury. Makes sense. The guy who's done all the financial stuff up to this point probably should be in charge.
Makes sense.
But at this point, Morris, I think, has had enough, and he declines.
He's like, I'm done with mucking about with the government.
Yes, he says, I want somebody else should be in charge of this.
Yes.
So he goes, Mr. Washington, I think you should look at Alexander Hamilton.
Okay, so maybe that's how...
So remember from previous stories that Hamilton has kind of been under Morris's wing in certain aspects of this, has helped him out. They believe in sort of the same concepts, and it's probably from Morris that Hamilton gets some of these concepts. Yeah. And so Morris says, this guy knows what he's doing. He's learned from me. I'm not up for it. He's the next best guy.
Okay.
So
once again, sort of pushing someone else into the spotlight.
And Washington was well aware of Hamilton's talents. Hamilton was his aide-de-camp during the war. So it's not like he was unknown to Hamilton.
Got it.
If you've ever watched Hamilton, the musical, you know that they have a relationship, but that actually happened. But it's Morris that says Morris was the unanimous choice to be the Secretary of the Treasury.
Okay, got it.
And it's only because he says no that Hamilton is put in that position.
Got it.
And Hamilton basically says Hamilton's policy that comes out is what Morris would have done, almost to a T. The only thing they differed on is Hamilton wanted the capital to be in New York City. Morris was willing to look at another spot.
Okay.
So with the compromise, we now have Washington, D.C. So Morris is actually part of the group, his convincing of Hamilton to compromise on that allows that to happen.
Isn't this sort of an infamous backdoor deal that goes down?
But Morris was sort of involved in the sense of, saying, hey, you should probably take it.
Right.
It's not worth giving up everything we want just to keep the capital somewhere,
Right. Okay.
New York's still going to be fine. So... and in that same year, he actually helped secure Pennsylvania's control of what's called the Erie Triangle, which gave it access to the Great Lakes. So it's that section that sticks up onto Lake Erie where Erie, Pennsylvania is today.
Right.
That wasn't originally part of Pennsylvania. So he helps gain that. So now Morris is pretty much a private citizen. He is not really involved in the federal government anymore. And he's soon to be out of the Senate as well. I think he's had enough of politics. He wants to focus on his business dealings. He's got a lot of losses to help recuperate from the war because, he put a lot of his own money at stake. So he gets into land speculation. That becomes his new thing.
Is this kind of like a get-rich-quick scheme that he has that he's like, I'm going to, I've got some debts. I'm going to make a lot of money doing this land speculation and then sort of flip those debts?
So, yes, but it was the fad of the day.
Okay.
So with the independence now, all that land that they couldn't go into because British wouldn't let them, they can now. So they own everything up to basically the Ohio River, and they're working on more. So there's a lot of open land now that wasn't open before.
Yeah.
So other leading figures, Washington is a big one, get into this. Morris really gets into this. So really his first attempt is our area.
Oh, cool.
So, giving a little bit of a history, everything from Seneca Lake west in New York State was disputed territory once we're a new country.
Okay.
Both New York and Massachusetts could lay claim to it, going back to their colonial charters. So they signed a treaty called the Treaty of Hartford, and the basic deal is Massachusetts is allowed to sell that land and make the money from the sale. Mm-hmm. But once it's sold, it becomes part of New York.
Okay.
So Massachusetts gets the money, New York gets the land.
Got it.
And that both worked out for both parties. So the first purchasers are Oliver Phelps and Nathaniel Gorham. They have this corporation in Massachusetts. They buy 6 million acres worth of land in 1788. However, they can't pay it off. So it defaults back to Massachusetts. And basically what they are able to sell is the eastern 2/3, so basically up to the Genesee River.
Okay.
There's a little bit farther east, but give you an idea.
But this didn't give Morris pause that, these guys couldn't sort of make a profit on the land they'd already purchased?
Well, he had more money than they did.
Okay. Even with the debts and everything.
Yeah, he was the richest man in the country.
Right.
Any of those debts, he's able to make up pretty quickly. And Phelps and Gorham try to make a profit by selling off as they're going. They don't have all of the principal that they need. Okay. He does. So he buys what's left from Massachusetts, sells off a big portion to the Pulteney estate, which is basically going Rochester south, kind of along the Genesee River, just the eastern side of it. And he uses the sale from that to buy the rest of it.
Okay.
So he owns everything west of the Genesee River.
Got it.
Which is 3.75 million acres worth of land. And he has this by 1790.
Okay.
So he's not looking to do anything with that land except to sell it to somebody else and make a profit.
Okay.
That's the whole point of this. He never steps foot there. He bought this sight unseen.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else out there can think of that, but buying 3.75 million acres worth of land and not knowing what's there.
Right.
That's what he did.
Pretty crazy.
So he starts putting out feelers, looking for buyers. He meets Theophilus Casanova, who is the general agent of the Holland Land Company, newly formed in Philadelphia. They start talking, and between 1791 and 1792, they work out a deal.
Okay.
And the deal is that he will sell 3.25 million acres of that land to the Holland Land Company for them to develop.
Okay, but he keeps a little chunk for himself.
He keeps what's called the Morris Reserve, which was 500,000 acres. It was the easternmost portion west of the Genesee River.
Do you know why he did that?
An insurance policy.
Okay.
He was a very smart businessman, and he said, well, if they develop this land's going to be worth so much more, I can sell it at even larger profit. Okay. Or if I decide to do something else, basically, yeah, just a insurance policy. So, this formal sale doesn't take complete effect until the Treaty of Big Tree in 1797, when they have to, when the Seneca are basically forced, coerced, whatever word you like to use, to give up their rights to the land. Because technically there's two owners. Right. There is what the United States recognizes, and then there's the Seneca. Right. So all of this dealing is sort of happening before they even talk to the Seneca. And then so there's a deal in place. Right. But they have to convince the Seneca to give up their rights. Right. Before it can formally take effect. Got it. Okay. So that's what happens at the Tree of Big Tree in Geneseo, current day Geneseo. Yes. So Morris keeps his Morris Reserve until 1800, when he sells off that as well. Okay. And that gets kind of broken up into smaller pieces. So besides land speculation, Morris gets into building canals, which was also a big thing at the time. So you have the Potomac Company and then two Pennsylvania companies, which kind of you have the Schuylkill and Susquehanna, and then the Delaware and Schuylkill Canal Company, which are in the early 1790s. They never come to pass. Okay. But everybody wanted to build a canal, and he gets in on that. So that's another business that starts to fail on him. Okay. Then he forms another land company led by John Nicholson, who is the Comptroller General of Pennsylvania, and they get into a lot of practices of buying a lot of lots in Pennsylvania, District of Columbia, Kentucky, Virginia, Georgia, and the Carolinas, so everywhere in the South, basically. Okay. They were intent on buying land, quickly reselling it. That doesn't happen. They can't resell things. The profit kind of goes away. Nicholson eventually gets arrested for his dealings because it seemed to be illegal. So he enters into another association where they keep buying up land in various parts of Pennsylvania. He works with Aaron Burr, who was actually helping out the Holland Land Company in this. And they invest in this, what was called the Pennsylvania Population Company. Okay. But that falls through again. So another, a lot of his dealings are just not happening right now. And part of that is because of the people he's working with. Okay, he's working with some shady characters. And people who can't put in what they say they can put in. Okay. So it's not really, he can't take on total blame, but you also got to pick good business partners. And right. He was struggling to do that. So eventually, he basically gets hung out to dry in all of these land purchases because he's the one left holding the bag. Often he was putting up more of the financial backing for it. And we're talking about 6 million acres they had altogether. And they're struggling to sell it off to make a profit. So eventually, he has to start mortgaging things. And 100,000 acres of the Morris Reserve are mortgaged in 1796 to John Baker Church. Church forecloses on that mortgage. And his son, Philip Schuyler Church, acquires it in 1800, and he begins the settling of Allegheny and Genesee counties with Angelica in Allegheny County, named after his daughter. And following the Panic of 1797, he was left what they called land rich and cash poor. So he had a lot of land, but not a lot of money.
Okay. And he was having a hard time selling off that land.
Yes, and he owned more land than any other American in the United States, but didn't have enough capital to pay off the creditors that he needed to buy that land.
Okay.
So this all starts to come back to him. Eventually, he's forced to sell his household furniture the next year, and what's left at the house was just some bedding, clothing, part of a quarter cask of wine, part of a barrel of flour, some coffee, a little sugar, and some bottled wine, which was the remainder of a cask that he gave to his daughter. So he goes from the richest man in the country to owing basically the shirt on his back.
Okay, wow.
And his creditors, so he tries to go to the hills, his rural estate, to avoid his creditors, and they literally come to his front door.
Wow.
And so, unable to dodge, he is actually arrested and thrown into the Prune Street debtor's prison in Philadelphia, and he is there for 3 years.
So talk a little bit about debtor's prison. What is that?
So it's a relic of the English system. Basically, when you can't pay off your creditors, you get thrown in jail. So you don't have any money, but we're going to throw you in jail until you can make money to pay people back.
Right. So it's kind of a flawed thinking.
Or people can bail you out, and then you go try to make your money back.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
Got it.
But nobody in the family has really any money because, well, he had all the money. So, so eventually they sell off his assets to help offset some of those debts, but it takes a long time to do that because he owes, in 1800, when he's released, they found that he had debts of $2,948,711.11.
And that's 1800 money.
And that's in 1800. And eventually some creditors kind of back off, and he's able to be released. But he's only able to be released after the Bankruptcy Act is signed by Congress of 1800, which changed the tax code, essentially really eliminating debtor's prison, but they do it specifically to get Morris out of prison.
Really? So they're feeling bad that he's in prison after having done
basically
so
saying you bailed us out so many times, we need to bail you out. And they're also probably looking for that if it can happen to him, it may happen to them.
Right. So they're like, you know what? Let's reform this code. Let's figure some things out. So he gets out of prison after 3 years.
And in 1801, he declares bankruptcy.
Okay.
And he's basically penniless for the rest of his life. He dies on May 8th, 1806 in Philadelphia. There are no public ceremonies, and he's buried basically in his local church's churchyard.
That's kind of a sad ending for a man who sort of was holding the reins for a lot of like the early
part. He kept things together, even if he wasn't the one out in front.
Right.
The good news is Morris does get some recognition as we go on, and his legacy does get recognized. He appears on the $1,000 bill from 1862 to 1863, and on a $10 certificate from 1878 to 1880. So he actually gets his face on some money. A lot of institutions eventually take on his name. You have Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh, and you also have Robert Morris University, Illinois. You have Mount Morris, New York, just down the road a little ways.
Right.
It's named after him because of him owning the Morris Reserve.
Right. Is that where Mount Morris is in that part of?
Yeah, be in that area. Mm-hmm. There's also a large dam on the Genesee River named after him. A number of ships in the Navy. Well, he was the first Secretary of the Navy, even if he wasn't called that, named after him. Morrisville, Pennsylvania is named after him. And there's even a type of boat that's named after him. And a statue of Morris stands at the Independence National Historic Site, and a monument of Morris, Washington, and Chaim Solomon stands at Herald Square in Chicago. And his former estate in Morrisville, Summer Seat, is listed as a National Historic Monument.
Okay, yeah, you said we would talk about.
Yes, and another one named Lemon Hill is also on the National Register of Historic Places. Mm-hmm. Basically, that's on a land that he owned. So not the home itself, but he owned the land. And part of the Liberty Bell Center is on the land that was his house on Market Street. That was the presidential home.
Right.
So a unique distinction he has, because the home is not there anymore, but it's where the Liberty Bell is. So he holds the distinction of being the only founding father whose house is a national memorial, but his life is not interpreted at the site.
Like, they don't really talk about him.
They don't talk about him at all. It's all about the Liberty Bell.
That's so sad. I feel like he's sort of been forgotten a little bit.
So he is included in the Washington, D.C. memorial of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence.
Well, at least he has that.
So he's gotten some of his due,
yeah,
but not to the extent that he probably should.
Yeah, he did. I think maybe people were embarrassed about how he ended sort of in this not very noble way. And so he doesn't live up to the myth of the other founding fathers. He does sort of
pass away in the mist of history.
Yeah.
He's not propped up like others are. We have a piece of his furniture from his household. We have a desk that was in his house at the museum. It's a very cool secretary desk style that has even a secret compartment.
So come stop by the Holland Land Office Museum if you want to see Robert Morris's desk, where maybe he was writing desperately to his creditors, trying to get a break.
Yes, who knows who he was writing to on that desk. But yeah, he's one of our local connections to the founding of the country. Even if he never lived here, stepped foot here, he had a strong impact also on Western New York.
Yeah, that's amazing. Great. I learned a lot about Robert Morris today. Thank you.
All right.